من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على النبي الأمي العربي القرشي المكي المدني الهاشمي صاحب قاب قوسين محبوب رب المشرقين والمغربين، جد الحسن والحسين النبي الحرمين والإمام القبلتين والرسول الثقلين الذين سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتخبين المنتجبين، لا سيما بقية الله الأرضين، روحي وأرواح العالمين لتراب مقدمه الفداء، واللعنة الدائمة الباقية على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم أجمعين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه تبارك وتعالى في كتابه الكريم وهو أصدق القائلين: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. For the honor and pleasure of the Holy Prophet of Islam, can we have a second salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad? And for the hastening of the reappearance of our awaited Savior, can we have a third one in your loudest voices? The discussion concerning the identification of the killers of Imam Hussain alayhi salam is a particularly important one. It's important for a number of reasons, not least because every year when Muharram comes closer and closer, there's a group of people who reiterate a number of things, a number of accusations. And amongst those accusations is one which features very prominently, and that is that the Shi'as killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So the flippant answer to the question of whether the Shi'as killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam is that if the Shi'as killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam, then where were the Sunnis to come and save him? But of course, there has to be a more intellectual and thought out response to find out the reality behind this accusation, to find out where does this accusation come from, why has it become so popular, and what is the reality behind the people who killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So in order to find out all of these things, what I've done is I've broken up this discussion into several parts. In the first part, we will look at something which seems to be very trivial, but is actually at the heart of this discussion. And that is the history of the city of Kufa. So we want to find out, number one, What is the history of this particular city? When did it come about? Who are the people who live in the city of Kufa? And what is the relationship of this city with the incident of Karbala and the killing of Imam Hussain alayhi salam? Then we need to find out from amongst the people who live in this particular city, what is the religion that they identify with? What faith do they follow? And then we have to look at the incidences that take place before the Battle of Karbala in order to help us find out the reality behind these people. And eventually, we will be able to trace right from the beginning the background of those people who were actually involved in the killing of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, and be able to formulate a response to who were the people who killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam, who is responsible for this massacre. So first of all, the city of Kufa. The city of Kufa is unlike many other cities which exist in the Arabian Peninsula. And the reason for this is that in the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam, there is no such place called Kufa. It doesn't exist. After the Holy Prophet of Islam passes away, in the time of the first Khalifa, there is still no place called Kufa. In the 17th year after Hijrah, during the reign of the second Khalifa, many different parts of the world are conquered by Muslims. Amongst them, the prize amongst them is that the former Persian Empire is now conquered by the Muslims. It has now become Muslim. Why is this important? This is important because now the border of the Muslim world is very vast. It has reached great lengths. And should there be a need for troops at the border of the Persian Empire or the former Persian Empire, to mobilize troops from Medina to that point will take too long. The battle will already be lost. Therefore, there needs to be a place in the middle of this area, i.e. somewhere halfway between Medina and the former Persian Empire, for troops to be stationed in order for their quick and easy mobilization in the need of battle. So for this purpose, to identify a place where troops can be stationed, the second Khalifa appoints a very prominent companion of the Holy Prophet, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas, as the person to find a place suitable for where troops can be stationed. Sa'ad bin Abi Waqqas identifies a number of places. Amongst them is Madian, the place where some of you may have been to ziyarah. Salman al-Farsi, prominent companion of the Holy Prophet, is buried. And amongst them is also Basra, which is right at the border with the Red Sea in Iraq. But both of these places, the climate is unsuitable for the people living in Medina. It's too damp, it's too humid. It's not suitable for people who've lived in the desert to go and live in these places. So these places are vetoed out. The third place that he selects is this place right in the middle of what is today Iraq, but of course Iraq did not exist at that time. And he creates a new city which is called Kufa. This city is created in order to station troops if they need to be mobilized to the border. Now, of course, you can't just have a city full of troops. You need people there as well. The Arab system of living in the pre-Islamic time was not in cities. If you're creating a city and people live in cities, it's easy to create another city and you just get people to shift from one city to another city. You give them incentives to move to another city, but they know how cities operate because they've already lived in one. The Arabs, of course, had never lived in cities. They were a tribal society, they lived in tribes. The Holy Prophet of Islam, after the advent of the religion, tried to encourage people to live in cities. And to this end, he created cities. Makkah was a tribal society. The Holy Prophet of Islam tried to make it into a city. Medina, of course, named the city after the Holy Prophet of Islam. i.e. the Holy Prophet of Islam united tribes who lived in Medina, warring with one another, and he made it into a city. So now how do you get people living in this part of the Arabian Peninsula to come and live all the way in the middle of Iraq? So Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas is appointed with this task, and he gets tribes to move from the Arabian Peninsula into Kufa. And many prominent tribes from the Arabian Peninsula are then shifted to this city, or this new city of Kufa. So the first thing is that the city of Kufa is created in the reign of the second Khalifa, and its creator, or the person who initiates the process, is Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas, companion of the Holy Prophet. Now the second Khalifa has a theory during his reign of Khilafat. I appreciate this topic is not the most interesting one, but you've got to bear with me here. He has a theory. His theory is that it's called the theory of Sabiqa. What it means is that people will be given benefits and be given posts in his rule on the basis of when they became Muslims. So a person who became Muslim in the first year after Hijrah will be given preference over somebody who became Muslim in the second year, and somebody who became Muslim in the second year will be given preference over somebody Muslim in the third year, and so on and so forth. So based on this theory, interestingly enough, you would think that when you're appointing somebody to be a governor, you would look for whether this person is qualified to become a governor, whether they can govern or not, rather than when they became Muslim. But this is the theory. So based on this theory, Ammar ibn Yasir, who is one of the earliest people to become Muslim, very famous story, is appointed governor of the city of Kufa. After him, various other notable companions of the Holy Prophet, including Hajr ibn Adi, are made governors of the city of Kufa. So far, what we know is that Kufa is a garrison town, essentially, created to station troops so that they can be mobilized for the Persian part of the Muslim world, and is created by Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas and inhabited by various different tribes from the Arabian Peninsula. So where does this tie in with the fact that the Shias killed Imam Hussain alayhi salam, that we oft hear about? So it ties in with the fact that later on, when Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam becomes the Khalifa in the 36th year after Hijrah. He shifts the capital of the Muslim world from Medina to Kufa. So for the first time, the capital is no longer Medina, but is now Kufa. And Amir al-Mu'mineen gives some historical words, something that's applicable even till today. And when they said to him, they objected to his move, he said that Medina will never be the capital of the Muslim world again. Today, we have a new city which is the capital, but Medina is still not the capital of the Muslim world. So Amir al-Mu'mineen shifts the capital to Kufa. Now once the capital is shifted to Kufa, it is invariable that certain people who are loyal to Amir al-Mu'mineen will also come to Kufa. However, in the city of Kufa at this particular moment in time, there are three kinds of people. And this is particularly important because it gives us the clue to identifying this whole puzzle. There are three kinds of people. The first kind of people who are in Kufa at this particular time are the people who, for whatever reason, whether it's personal, whether it's political, whether it's religious, whatever reason, their reasons vary. However, all of them, this group of people, this first group, they do not like Banu Umayyah. They either have a personal problem with them, or a political problem with them, or a religious problem with them. Either way, they do not like Banu Umayyah. So because they don't like Banu Umayyah, they have sided with Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam. The second group of people are those who have believed after the Holy Prophet in the authority and legitimacy of the Khalifas. So they've believed in the first Khalifa, then they've believed in the second Khalifa, then they believed in the third Khalifa. And then after the murder of the third Khalifa, they have believed in Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam as the fourth Khalifa. And these people are in the majority. And then there's a third group of people. This third group of people are people who believe in Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam as the Khalifatuhu bila fasl after the Holy Prophet of Islam. They are in extreme minority. They are the kinds of people whose names you can count on the back of your hand. They are people like Malik al-Ashtar. They are people like Maytham al-Tammar. They are people like Sa'sa ibn Sawhan. They are people like Asbagh ibn Nubata. They are very, very few in number. This is the city of Kufa in the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salatu wasalam. The evidence for this, you might ask, well, you say, well, you've classified these people into these three groups. Well, what's the evidence for this? Did you just come up with it for yourself, or is there some reason why you've classified people in this way? Well, there's some evidence for this. The evidence for this comes at a particularly important moment in the Battle of Siffin. The Battle of Siffin, as you know, rages on for months. And once the Syrians realize that they've lost a significant number of people, and there's no resumption, there's no resolving of this battle. There's no way that this battle is being resolved. The only thing that is happening is that lives of people on both sides is being lost. So what do? Amr ibn al-As, who's the chief advisor to the governor of Syria, comes into the tent and he says, the only way we can save ourselves is if we deceive the people. So he says, well, how do you suggest that we're going to deceive them? After all these months of fighting, what do you suggest that we're going to do that will deceive them? So he says, I have an idea. This might work, but it might not work. But it's an idea, and at the moment, this is the only thing we have to save ourselves. He says, what's your idea? He says, my idea is that we get all the Qur'ans that we have, and we put them on lances, and we come out shouting that now the Qur'an will be the judge between us. So they realize, they say, well, okay, it's not the greatest idea, but we don't have much choice. So this is what they do. They come out with Qur'ans placed on lances, and they shout that the Qur'an will now be a judge between us. Amir al-Mu'mineen says to his army, do not be fooled by this action. Why? He says, if they wanted the Qur'an to be a judge between us, they wouldn't have spent 3 months fighting and 10,000 people being killed. On the first day when we came here and they initiated the fighting, they would have said, let's have the Qur'an judge between us. Why is it after all these months of fighting and so many people being killed, have they remembered that they believe in the Qur'an? However, a group of people amongst the people on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen are very adamant. They say, how can we fight them once the Qur'an has been placed between us? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am the speaking, walking, talking Qur'an. Now I am telling you that we have to continue fighting. Because this is merely a deception, it's merely a trick, it's merely a way to save themselves from defeat. This group, however, is adamant. They continue to say that we have to stop the fighting. And it comes to a point where they say, if you don't stop the fighting, we're going to kill you. Malik al-Ashtar is on the front line. And the narrative states that he's reached right to the tent of the governor of Syria. And it's only a matter of moments before the battle theoretically will be over. Amir al-Mu'mineen sends a message to Malik al-Ashtar at the front line and says to him, I want you to come back. Now Malik al-Ashtar doesn't know what's going on over here. He's thinking, what kind of message is this? So he sends back a message. He says, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I am literally moments away from ending this battle. All these months of fighting, and everything will be over. This group is adamant. They're saying, if you don't call him back, we're going to kill you. Amir al-Mu'mineen sends back another message. And he says, Malik al-Ashtar, I order you as the Imam of your time that if you want to see me alive, you're going to come back. Malik al-Ashtar comes back. Now he learns of what's happening here and what kind of ultimatum the Imam has been given. So number one, if everybody who lived in Kufa was Shia and believed in Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam as Imam, there would have been no question of anybody coming to him and saying, we're going to kill you. Because that's not what you do to an Imam. But further on, what happens after that? Once Malik al-Ashtar has come back and the battle has been suspended, now they say we have to have arbitration. We have to make peace. So they say, well, who should be the person who should arbitrate on our behalf? Now from the Syrian side, it's very easy. Amr ibn al-As is appointed as the person who's going to arbitrate. Amr ibn al-As is very famous to have been known for his cunningness, for his smartness, for all these things. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam wants someone who is his equal to be able to match him. So Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I suggest that Abdullah ibn Abbas, who is the cousin of the Holy Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen, as the arbiter. This group of people who have insisted on this arbitration, they say, he's your relative. He's going to favor you. We want someone who's neutral. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, if you don't want Ibn Abbas, have Malik al-Ashtar. He say, we don't want him either, because he's your loyal follower as well. So he's going to favor you. Now, this is particularly important. Now Amir al-Mu'mineen says, he says, I've suggested to you Ibn Abbas and Malik al-Ashtar, and you didn't want either of them. Now it's up to you. Now, I am not part of this arbitration. Because whoever you're going to choose, in other words, he doesn't say this, these are my words, whoever you're going to choose is going to be incompetent. So they choose Abu Musa al-Ash'ari. Now, this is a very interesting choice, because Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was someone who was in favor in the time of the third Khalifa. And in the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, due to his bad practices, had fallen out of favor. So this group of people, interestingly enough, pick this individual, who, for all his other merits may be discussed, is not the sharpest screwdriver in the toolbox. And by no means any kind of match for Amr ibn al-As. Now you will recall, and this is particularly important, you will recall that they had raised the Quran on spears. So you would think that arbitration of any kind would involve the Holy Quran. However, when Amr ibn al-As and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari arrive and they sit at the table in order to arbitrate, not a single verse of the Holy Quran is mentioned in the discussion. How convenient. Instead, Amr ibn al-As says to Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he begins by saying, you're a companion of the Holy Prophet, your rank is very great, so on and so forth. And he puts him up a peg. Now, when Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was going for the arbitration, Ibn Abbas had warned him. He said, look, Amr ibn al-As is very cunning, he's very smart. So make sure you're not outdone by his cunningness. Abu Musa al-Ash'ari says, don't worry, this is fine. I will be okay. Amr ibn al-As says to him, you're a companion of the Holy Prophet, you're much greater than me, so on and so forth. And then he says, here is my proposal. My proposal is this, that over these 3 months of fighting, much bloodshed has ensued, many people have been killed, and lots of lives have been wasted. So, and the people responsible for this are both the governor of Sham and Ali ibn Abi Talib. So I suggest that I will depose the governor of Sham, and you depose Ali ibn Abi Talib, and then we will leave it for the Muslims to decide who they want their ruler to be. Now you will recall that the Battle of Siffin had taken place because the governor of Syria refused to accept the authority of Amir al-Mu'minin as the Khalifa. And that the governor of Syria was adamant that Amir al-Mu'minin bring to justice the killers of the third Khalifa. Yet here in the arbitration, none of this is mentioned. Instead, the discussion is about who should be the Khalifa. And most interestingly, no mention of the Holy Quran. So once this is agreed, Amr ibn al-As says to Abu Musa al-Ashari, you go first. You're a companion of the Holy Prophet. And you're much greater than me, so on and so forth. You go first. So Abu Musa al-Ashari stands up and he says that we have discussed that much bloodshed has ensued, warfare has gone on for too long, and therefore I depose Ali ibn Abi Talib as the Khalifa. Once he makes this announcement and he sits down, Amr ibn al-As stands up. And he says, you heard what the most honorable companion of the Holy Prophet Abu Musa al-Ashari has said, that Ali ibn Abi Talib has been deposed. And therefore, I hereby announce the governor of Syria as the Khalifa of the Muslims. Abu Musa al-Ashari realizes that he's been deceived, but now it's too late. The arbitration, of course, ends as a mockery as much as the war had been. But what this shows is that on the side of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, in the Battle of Siffin and in the city of Kufa were people who did not believe in him as the Imam. And that they were in the majority. And not only were they in the majority, they were the kinds of people who were willing to go all out and even threaten the Imam ﷺ's own life. So this is the Battle of Siffin. It's now ended. This is Kufa in the 37th year after Hijrah. Amir al-Mu'minin is martyred in the 40th year after Hijrah, then a peace treaty ensues. And after the peace treaty, once the governor of Syria dies and Yazid becomes the Khalifa, now the people of Kufa are severely unhappy. These are still the same people of Kufa. They haven't changed. They're still the same people. It's just a few decades have gone past. It's now the 60th year after Hijrah. Now these people of Kufa write letters to Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam, and this is something that we hear about every single year. But what is more important than the fact that they write letters is to find out what does it say in the letter. Because not all the letters are the same. There's different kinds of letters. So it's important to find out what does it say in the letter in order to identify the people writing the letters and what they actually believed. So they write letters. The Imam alayhi salam is in Mecca and he has received a number of these letters. So let me read out to you some of the extracts from some of these letters. There is a letter which states that Yamna Rasulullah, we are unhappy with Yazid as being the Khalifa. And we are unhappy with the governor that he has appointed, so much so that we don't attend the Friday prayers, nor do we attend the Eid prayers behind him, because we don't consider him to be worthy of that position. Ya ibn Rasulillah, you are our Imam, so come towards us. And if you come towards us, then we will banish Nu'man ibn Bashir, the governor, to Syria, and we will consider you the leader over us. This is one of the letters that is written to the Imam. It is signed by some very prominent individuals from the city of Kufa. It's signed by Sulaiman ibn Surd al-Khuzai, who later on is the leader of the Tawwabun movement after the Battle of Karbala. It's also signed, amongst other prominent notables of Kufa, by Habib ibn Mudahir al-Asadi. Now there's another letter. This is also a letter to Imam Hussain alayhi salam, but the contents of it are very interesting. This letter says that the city of Kufa is in a very good economic state. Agriculturally it is very wonderful. Trees are overflowing with fruits. Ponds are full up. And so, whenever you desire, come towards us. It's also a letter to Imam Hussain alayhi salam, but it's very different in content from the first one. And letters like these, both types of letters, continue to arrive while the Imam is in Mecca. But then a third type of letter arrives. This type of letter is very interesting. This second type of letter is signed also by people of Kufa. And it's interesting to see the end of those people who've signed this second type of letter are some of the ones who are involved in the killing of Imam Hussain alayhi salam in Karbala. And now there's a third type of letter. And this third type of letter is very interesting. This third type of letter says, Ya ibn Rasulillah, you are our Imam, and it is your responsibility to help us from Yazid. And if you don't come, we will complain to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment that we called our Imam and he didn't come to our assistance. The narration states that when the Imam received this letter, he was shaking. And the action that he takes after having received this letter is the epitome of the Shia theory of Imamat, which is what? Which is that an Imam has a responsibility over all his followers, regardless of how trying the circumstances might be, regardless of how much opposition people put in his way. The Imam has a responsibility to help those who are his followers and when they ask for his assistance. And is at this particular moment that the Imam alayhi salatu wasalam makes a decision to send his emissary to the city of Kufa. Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. Suffice for his greatness is this, that every single child in Karbala, from Bani Hashim, had learnt the art of sword fighting from Muslim ibn Aqil. Sufficient for his greatness is this. But if any more proof was needed, when the Imam alayhi salam sends him towards Kufa, he says, I'm sending towards you, O people of Kufa, Akhi, wabna ammi, وَثِقَتِي مِنْ أَهْلِي. I'm sending towards you my brother, the son of my uncle and the most reliable from my family, Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. He sends him to Kufa. The narrative states that Muslim ibn Aqil arrives in the city of Kufa on the 5th of Shawwal in the 60th year after Hijrah. When he arrives, people in Kufa welcome him, to the extent that some narratives state that 18,000 people pledge allegiance on his hand, considering him the emissary of Imam Hussain. Yet what happens? Where do all these 18,000 disappear? Why is he left alone? When Muslim ibn Aqil arrives in Kufa, Yazid is informed that this is what has happened. So, with Yazid is sitting his advisor, one he had inherited from his father, and he asks him, what should I do? What do you suggest that I should do? He says, what I suggest is that during the reign of your father, Ziyad ibn Abi, Ziyad the son of his father. Why? Because 7 people claim to be his father. Ziyad bin Abi was the governor of Kufa. And he was a very ruthless individual, as you can imagine for someone who doesn't know who his father is. Who is a very ruthless individual. In order to give him some honor and legitimacy, the governor of Syria had claimed him to be his brother, and thus said, don't call him Ziyad ibn Abi, call him Ziyad ibn Abu Sufyan. So this advisor says to him, he says, this Ziyad ibn Abi was the governor of Kufa, and he was ruthless. So what I suggest to you is that you make his son Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad as the governor of Kufa, because he will be equally as ruthless. So Yazid sends Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, who is the governor of Basra, from Basra to Kufa. Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad realizes that if he enters the city of Kufa, ordinarily the people will turn against him. So what does he do? He covers his face. And he's dressed in black. And now he enters the city of Kufa. When he enters the city of Kufa, people think that he is Imam Hussain. So they come and they welcome him in droves. Now this is a very interesting tactic from Ibn Ziyad. Why? Because at once he's been able to protect himself and also identify the followers of Imam Hussain. And when he reaches the entrance to the governor's palace is when he removes the veil from his face, and the people realize that this is Ibn Ziyad. Now he orders a curfew in the city of Kufa. And he says anybody who's seen with Muslim ibn Aqil, anybody who does any protection for Muslim ibn Aqil will be killed. So Muslim ibn Aqil, in order to protect the lives of his closest, because of course there's narratives are mentioned that he had either stayed at the house of Mukhtar or he had stayed at the house of Hani ibn Urwa. Mukhtar is put into prison and Hani ibn Urwa is later on killed. So Imam alayhi salatu wasalam leaves the house wherever he was staying. And he, after the Maghrib prayers, is seen in the city of Kufa all alone until he gets tired and he comes and sits outside the door of a particular house. The woman opens the door and she says, who are you? What are you doing? The situation in the city of Kufa is very bad. Why are you sitting here? Why don't you go home? Muslim ibn Aqil says, what does a person do who doesn't have a home? What does a man do? He who doesn't have a home. He says to her, according to some narratives, he says to her, I'm very thirsty. Please give me a glass of water. So she presents him with the water. Then she asks him, she says to him, well, who are you? What are you doing in the city of Kufa if you don't have a home? He says, I am Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. She is a lover of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. She asks him to come inside. He spends the night in this woman's house. Later at night, the woman's son comes. Of course, the news has been spread through Kufa that whosoever brings Muslim ibn Aqil to Ibn Ziyad, he will be rewarded. Late at night, the woman's son comes. And he hears the sound of ibadah coming from the room. So he asks his mother, he says, who's in the house? And she avoids his question until he's insistent. And the man finds out that Muslim ibn Aqil, the one that Ibn Ziyad is looking for, is in my house. So he goes to the palace and informs them that Muslim ibn Aqil is in my house. In the morning, the troops of Ibn Ziyad are outside the house. Muslim ibn Aqil says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. He says to, the woman tries to dissuade him. She says to him, don't go outside. Muslim ibn Aqil says, my time has come. And I do not want your house to become part of the crossfire. This is a battle between me and them. So he leaves the house. He comes out. The narrative states that Muhammad ibn Ash'ath has come with 500 men to face Muslim ibn Aqil. Muslim ibn Aqil is all alone. He fights them. He fights them and the people, the men are decreasing. Muhammad ibn al-Ash'ath sends a message to Ibn Ziyad. He says, I need more men. Ibn Ziyad sends a message back to him. He said, I've sent you with 500 fighting one man. Why do you need more men? Muhammad ibn al-Ash'ath, and by Allah, these are the words of the Maqatil, that Muhammad ibn al-Ash'ath sends back a message. He says to him, Ibn Ziyad, do you think we're fighting the son of Kufa's greengrocer? We're fighting Muslim ibn Aqil ibn Abi Talib. This is the bravest man, one of the bravest men from Bani Hashim. They realize that they will not be able to combat him one-on-one. So what do? They dig a trench. They dig a trench and they cover it with leaves. So that when Muslim ibn Aqil comes forward, gallops on his horse, he will fall into the trench. Once he goes into the trench, they arrest him and they bring him to Ibn Ziyad. Somebody says in the court, Muslim, you didn't greet the Amir. You didn't greet the Amir. Muslim says, Mali Amir illa Hussain. I don't have an Amir, I don't have a master except for Hussain. Ibn Ziyad says, do you have any last request before you die? Muslim ibn Aqil says, I only have 3 requests. My first one is that I owe a debt to some people in Medina. So sell my sword and my armor and pay my debt. My second request is that I be given a burial. And my third request is my Hussain is informed that he chooses not to come to Karbala. Ibn Ziyad says your first 2 requests will be fulfilled, but your third request will not be fulfilled. Muslim ibn Aqil is taken to the roof of the palace. Allahu Akbar. He's taken to the roof of the palace. On the roof of the palace, his head is cut off. Before his head is cut off, he turns towards Makkah. And he says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. They're walking, and all of a sudden, Imam Hussain says, Wa alaykum as-salam. Abul Fadl Abbas looks around. He doesn't see anyone. He says, Oh my master, to whose salam were you replying? To whose salam were you replying? The Imam says, Abul Fadl Abbas, oh Abbas, bring to me the daughter of Muslim Hamida. Bring to me the daughter of Muslim Hamida. He brings forward Hamida, and the Imam puts her in his lap, and he starts to rub her head. Hamida looks up and she says, Oh my uncle Hussain, is my father okay? Is my father okay? And the Imam says, Why do you ask such a question? Hamida says, Oh my uncle, you're treating me like people treat the orphans. You're treating me like the people treat the orphans. The Imam says, Hamida, from now on, you are to call me father. Because your father is no more. From now on, you are to call me father. But alas, on the eve of the 10th of Muharram, there was no one to say this to Sakina. There was no one to rub their hand on the head of Sakina. Instead, when she used to cry for her father, somebody would come forward with a whip and somebody would steal the earrings. بس عزیزان محترم, آپ نے گریہ بھی کیا, مصائب بھی ہو گئے. 2-4 منٹ اور کی زحمت دینا چاہ رہا ہوں. آج محرم کا پہلا روز گزر گیا اور دوسری شب کی ابتدا ہو گئی ہے. مقاتل یہ کہتے ہیں کہ اسی شب کے کو امام حسین علیہ السلام کربلا پہنچے تھے. روایت کہتی ہے کہ ایک مقام پر پہنچ کر امام کا گھوڑا ٹھہر گیا اور پھر آگے نہیں بڑھتا تھا. بعض روایتوں میں یہ ہے کہ امام نے گھوڑے تبدیل کیے, 7 تک گھوڑے تبدیل کیے, مگر کوئی بھی گھوڑا آگے نہیں بڑھتا تھا. امام گھوڑے سے نیچے تشریف لائے اور کہا کہ یہاں کے لوگوں کو بلایا جائے. لوگوں کو بلایا گیا تو امام نے کہا کہ اس جگہ کا نام کیا ہے؟ اس جگہ کا نام کیا ہے؟ ایک آگے بڑھا, کہا تسمى غازریہ, کہا اسے غازریہ کہتے ہیں. امام نے پوچھا اور کوئی نام ہے؟ کسی نے آگے بڑھ کے کہا تسمى شط الفرات, کہا اسے شط الفرات بھی کہتے ہیں. امام نے اصرار کیا, کہا اور کوئی نام ہے؟ کہا تسمى نینوا, کہا اسے نینوا بھی کہتے ہیں. امام اصرار کیے جا رہے ہیں. آگے بڑھ کے ایک اور نے جواب دیا, کہا تسمى ناصریہ, کہا اسے ناصریہ بھی کہتے ہیں. امام کا اصرار کہ اور کوئی نام بھی ہے. میں نے ارباب منبر سے سنا ہے کہ ایک بڑے بوڑھے شخص کو اندر سے لایا گیا, بہت ہی بوڑھے شخص کو اندر سے لایا گیا, اور وہ حاضر ہوا امام کے سامنے اور کہنے لگا, میں نے اپنے بزرگوں سے سنا ہے کہ اسے کربلا کہتے ہیں. میں نے اپنے بزرگوں سے سنا ہے کہ اسے کربلا کہتے ہیں. امام نے فرمایا, اعوذ من کرب و بلا, ہم اللہ سے پناہ چاہتے ہیں ہر کرب اور ہر بلا سے. وہ کہنے لگا, یا ابن رسول اللہ, یا ابن رسول اللہ کیا آپ کا ارادہ ہے کہ آپ اس زمین پہ قیام کریں گے؟ کہا بخدا اس زمین پہ قیام نہ کیجئے گا، جو کوئی بھی اس زمین سے گزرا ہے اسے کسی نہ کسی مشکل، کسی نہ کسی مصیبت کا ابتلا ہوا ہے، بخدا اس زمین پہ قیام نہ کیجئے گا۔ عزیزو بس مجلس تمام ہو گئی، امام کہنے لگے ارے یہ وہی زمین ہے جس کا میں نے پیغمبر اکرم سے اپنے بچپنے میں وعدہ کیا تھا، یہ وہی زمین ہے جہاں فاطمہ زہرا کا بھرا گھر لوٹا جائے گا۔ بس عزیزو کربلا میں امام آ گئے، کربلا میں آ گئے، خیمے لگا دیے گئے، سب لوگ آرام گاہوں میں پہنچ گئے۔ تو ایک دم سے ایک صحابی نے یہ محسوس کیا کہ امام خیمے سے باہر تشریف لے گئے ہیں۔ روایت میں اختلاف ہے، کسی روایت میں ہے کہ ظہیر قین تھے، کسی میں ہے کہ ہلال نافع تھے، بہرحال جو کوئی بھی تھا وہ باہر نکلا تو اس نے یہ دیکھا کہ امام رات کی تاریکی میں اکیلے نکلے ہوئے ہیں۔ تو وہ پیچھے پیچھے امام کے آنے لگا، امام نے محسوس کیا، کہا کہ کون ہے؟ تو صحابی نے اپنا تعارف کروایا، کہنے لگے مولا مجھے یہ اچھا نہ لگا کہ آپ اکیلے باہر نکلیں، لہٰذا میں پیچھے پیچھے آ گیا۔ امام نے ساتھ لیا اور جگہ جگہ پہ رک کے بتاتے تھے، کہنے لگے کہ دیکھو یہ حر کے شہادت کا مقام ہے۔ کچھ آگے بڑھے، کہنے لگے یہاں پر حبیب شہید ہوں گے، کچھ آگے بڑھے، کہنے لگے یہاں پر تم شہید ہوگے، اور یوں کرتے کرتے آگے بڑھتے جاتے تھے، کہتے تھے کہ یہ وہ مقام ہے جہاں علی اصغر کے گلے میں تیر لگے گا، ارے یہ وہ مقام ہے جہاں میرے علی اکبر کے سینے میں برچھی لگے گی، ارے یہ وہ مقام ہے جہاں ابوالفضل عباس گھوڑے سے گریں گے۔ کچھ اور آگے بڑھے تو دیکھا کہ صحابی کبھی اوپر دیکھتا ہے، کبھی نیچے دیکھتا ہے، کبھی دائیں دیکھتا ہے، کبھی بائیں دیکھتا ہے۔ امام پوچھنے لگے ارے تم کس چیز کو دیکھ رہے ہو؟ صحابی کہنے لگا مولا جب سے اس جگہ پہ آئے ہیں مجھے ایک بیوی کے رونے کی آواز آتی ہے، اور ایسا لگتا ہے کہ جیسے کوئی دکھیا ماں اپنے جوان کو رو رہی ہو۔ بس عزیزو مجلس تمام ہو گئی۔ حسین کہنے لگے ہاں یہ وہ جگہ ہے جہاں تمہارا امام شہید ہوگا، یہ آواز میری ماں فاطمہ زہرا کی ہے جب سے میں نے مدینہ چھوڑا ہے، ماں نے بقیع چھوڑا ہے۔ الا لعنت اللہ علی القوم الظالمین وسيعلم الذین ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون انا للہ وانا الیہ راجعون۔ پروردگار عالم سے دعا ہے کہ ہماری اس قلیل عبادت کو اپنی بارگاہ میں قبول فرمائے، ہمارے گناہان کبیرہ و صغیرہ کو معاف فرمائے، ہمارے مرحومین کے درجات کو بلند فرمائے، شیعان حیدر کرار دنیا میں جہاں کہیں بھی ہیں ان کی عزت، آبرو، جان اور مال کی حفاظت فرمائے۔ ہماری اور آپ کی سب سے بڑی دعا ہمارے زمانے کے امام کے ظہور میں تعجیل فرمائے، اور ہمیں اس قابل بنائے کہ ہم ان کے اعوان و انصار میں سے شمار کیے جائیں۔ ربنا تقبل منا انکا انت السمیع العلیم۔ ماتم حسین۔